Hi Copic and the Craft Room fans, Michelle Houghton here. I am sharing a grab and go box from Stamp AnnieThing. This is something new that she started a few months back, and every other month she releases a brand new grab and go box, and I'm showing you everything that can be found inside one. We have a pack of cardstock. This particular kit came with twine and glitter, 3 of them. A glue stick that is awesome, liquid glue. And here it's a card pack. So you've got your card bases and envelopes ready to go. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'll find 2 more later. We've got 6 stamps to start. And then I've got the line die cuts for each of those stamps. Oh, here's one more. There's number 7 and number 8 on the stamps, and then all of those stamps come with their very own die. This particular set came with a special die that does kind of a piece to go on the back of your cards. We have double-sided sticky tape. This group had beautiful charms that it came with, and also 2 stencils. Some of the packs also come with things like pattern paper, which this one did not, but we had extra stamps in this one. So each box is slightly different. And the reason I'm sharing that is there is a brand new box coming out, and there was a separate die that came separate in an envelope. But the reason I'm sharing this is this Friday there is a brand new grab and go box coming out. So kind of be watching for that at Stamp AnnieThing. So this is from last month's grab and go release, and I did not have much time to color then. I had a bunch of stuff going on. So I wanted to do more coloring from that set, and I'll warn you, as of yesterday, there were only 3 of these sets left. But I am going to start on the skin tone, and I'm starting with an E50. This is a fairly long coloring video, so I did have to speed it up quite a bit, and I apologize for that. E21 is coming in next. I am doing kind of that center front lighting, so very, very simple, very straightforward. Got these nice round faces, so this is coming in from the edges up under the eyes. I'm trying to be careful to leave the whites of the eyes, and I do add a little nose. It has a little bit darker shading to one side of the face, so we've got this funny little light area that's remaining. That's with my E21. E31 is then going to be my shadow area, at least to start. So I'm coming into those same areas in less amounts. I've done a touch of E04 into those deepest shadow areas. So that's at the corner of his eyes, the very base of his hand, and right up underneath the edge of his hairline. This particular character has that heavy curly hair, and so it falls over his forehead, and we want to make sure to shadow that. So now I'm going backwards. I've got my E31. I'm blending in that E04. Then I'm coming in with my E21 and softening the edge of the E31. So when I do this, I'm working right on the edge of that darker color and pulling it into that light area. With my lightest color, I can circle from that light area into that next color. So this is that E50. And for me, this is always where it kind of just settles. So it's like, whoosh, okay, it worked. I've got it all blended together. And then I can go back and touch some of those areas where I feel like I'm still seeing a funky line or it didn't get dark enough. The little tongue I always touch with E04 and E93. Pulling some of that dark area a little further and then creating some cast shadows. And I started with my E31, but I didn't feel like it got quite dark enough, so I added some C3 on top of those cast shadows. So this is under his hairline, where I think those would be kind of casting that shadow, under his chin. I kept this very simple. For the hair, I'm actually basing this in a blue violet, a BV20. And that's because I'm going to use earth tones, but I wanted to cool those down further. So this is a really light blue violet, and that's going to help cool down the earth tones that I'm coming in with. And E44 is what I'm starting with. So he's got curly hair, or more specifically, wavy hair. So what I'm doing is I'm starting at the dip of each of those waves. So anything that goes in towards his head, that's where I'm starting, and I'm flicking out from that towards the top of the wave, the part that goes further away from him. So it literally is going piece by piece. A lot of times I'll recommend to people, especially when they're new at this, maybe you start on one half of his head. Do half of his head and then work the other half of his head. Just because sometimes I do know a head of hair like this can be a little overwhelming. So pick the left side, the right side, get that done, get that mapped out, and then come back and do the other. Once I have that step with that first earth tone done, this next piece is considerably easier because I'm going from the exact same spot, flicking out, using less flicks. So it's less in number. It's not necessarily shorter. Some of these are still flicking out into the highlight. Some are long, some are short. It's fewer flicks. Going all the way through both sides. And this is why this video takes so long, is this hair in particular. The skin tone took a little longer than some of them, but the hair is taking considerably longer. Wavy hair is probably the hair that takes the longest. Not so much curly. Curly usually can use more of a texture or or pattern. Wavy hair, because you're treating individual waves, takes the longest. And so for me, at least, the way I do it, this particular marker, my E49, is what I'm finishing with, and it looked like it was going to spit up or blob on my image. So I took the second cap off and finished up with that. The E49 is very limited. Now I've gone back all the way to the E44, so I skipped that middle E47, and I'm pulling over the top of more of those highlight areas to get the hair even darker. Notice the highlight is still there, but it's almost disappeared. That also softened the lines of the E47 and the E49. Now I'm coming back with that blue violet and almost completely filling in those little white spots, but pushing back and softening the E44. I'm coming in one last time with my colorless blender. It's going to add a little bit of brightness to those highlights and lighten that up. So his garments are all going to be done in that series of cool grays. So I'm using these short, little, tiny stippling marks or flicks with C1 all over his kind of fur cape, and then C3. With C5, I'm coming in. Each time I go up in a number, I'm using less or fewer flicks again, kind of like the hair. These are obviously really short, stubby little flicks. And I'm overlapping them a little bit, and that was the C7. And I'm going back with C1 and kind of softening a little bit of that. And I'm also filling in the sword with some C3 as well, and hitting kind of that edge with 0, my colorless blender. The cape, I am starting with a C5 and going from the inside edge out, trying to keep those kind of outer edges bright. And then C9 all the way down to that inner edge. So it comes up probably 2/3 the way onto that C5. Coming back with the C5 to try to blend that C9 just a touch. Notice I've got that tiny little white highlight left behind. And then I am coming in with my colorless blender and rubbing back and forth over that white area. That's going to seep into the C5 and soften it. C3 is going on his coat or like tunic. And then C5 to add a little bit of shape. So he rounds them just a little bit, and then on his pants. C7 is now going to shade those pants, kind of hitting that inner edge. It's also going to come up the inner edge of his tunic. C5 to blend that back in on his knees and on the tunic, and C3 down the center of the tunic. This is all really dark, but I'm going kind of with how the character looks on the TV show. So C5 on his boots to start. These are going black. So starting with that C5 again, like I did on the cape, and then right to C9. I've got a very crisp edge on that outer edge along the highlight, and then on the inner edge, you can still see the C5. Blending back the C5, again, inner edge on both boots near the highlight. And then I'm using my colorless blender to soften that C5 edge. So we've got the outer edge of the highlight is crisp and sharp. The inner edge of the highlight is soft. I'm doing a tiny bit of E23 and E27 on these straps that come across his body, assuming they might be a leather, like just a brown leather instead. I felt like I had to break up all that gray. So C1 is going to start on this wolf. Now I know in the show, this particular character's wolf is white, but I did not go there. E93 is going in the ears, and then a little bit of colorless blender to soften it further, so we have those fleshy inner ears. C3 is starting kind of smooth on the muzzle and then flicking out. So I want to give that texture of that fur, but I'm really kind of taking my time to go through and across the wolf to make sure I'm thinking about the direction the fur would be going on a wolf or a dog. So out from the eye, kind of out to those ruffs along his face, small amounts of C3 on the underside of his body, underside of the tail, that back, those two back legs, the ones further from the viewer, get darker to push them back. And then C5 is coming in smaller amounts in the exact same areas. And again, this wolf is going more of a kind of mid-gray versus white. So I think looking back, if I did this one again, I'd probably try to leave his wolf white just because that's more accurate to the character. C7, I'm hitting this in very limited areas, trying to really think about where would I want to deepen that color. So I'm going into things like the corners of his eyes, that back hind leg, to really push that back and show the difference. And then I'm coming back with C3 to soften some of those flicks of the C5 and C7. So I'm still using little short little dash or flick marks, stippling marks, but it's helping soften those edges. And C1 is coming into those highlight areas again. We're just softening things at this point. I'm leaving that texture showing, but it's going to help make it look a little less like stippling. Finishing up with some C9 in the eyes and on the nose to get that really black again. Every once in a while when I stamp, I don't get things quite as black or dark, especially bigger areas. So, okay. So these two guys are going to go on a card. I usually fussy cut, but the set itself actually comes with the die cuts. You can use the dies to cut these out, and you could do either. I had a really fun time creating a card. It's all from stuff out of the box, and you'll see it here in a second. If you have not had a chance, I am kind of on a break from Copic College, but if you're interested in my fall classes, check that out at scrapweaver.com. And make sure to check out the new grab and go release from Stamp AnnieThing this Friday. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Make sure you have a happy, colorful day.